All right, welcome to BilingualWe, episode number 2, advocating for your bilingual child. I'm here with Heather Robertson Devine, owner of Bookstell Sewer, and Dee Garcia. And I'm so sorry that we can't see Dee tonight, but at least we can hear her, I believe. Hi,
Yes.
Dee.
Hi, everybody. It's Dee Garcia.
And I'm Christa Jimenez, owner of Pura Vida Moms. And we're going to chat tonight about what it's like to advocate for your bilingual child in different settings, which is something Dee has a lot of expertise in. So we're going to get right started since we got a little bit of a late start, and I'll go ahead and let Heather Heather and Dee talk a little bit about Dee's bilingual model at home.
Okay. Do you want me just to give an introduction?
Yeah,
Heather?
Tell us about, your family and why you're a bilingual family. And I know the story and I love it, so share it with the world.
Hola, papi. No, papi, estoy ocupada. Okay. Ahorita te voy a mirar, okay? Ve a jugar afuera. All right. My name is Dee Garcia.
That's exactly it. We couldn't have asked for a better moment.
I know, and he was not supposed to come inside, so Papa's gonna be really mad. Anyways, my name is Dee Garcia. Professionally, I am the director of Multilingual and Global Education for the School District of Waukesha. I think what that really means is I lead the vision, the articulation of the instruction, the curriculum, the assessment, and in general, the happiness of our dual language program and its relationship to world languages and to our ESL program. I was a teacher for the fantastic Milwaukee Public School District for over 10 years, and my husband still works there. He's been there about 15 years and came out to Waukesha a few years ago. We are both bilingual educators. My husband is from Colombia, South America, and teaching is his second career, as it is mine. And together we have one little boy who's 5, and we are raising him in a very monocultural, monolingual way because of some of the outside situations that we deal with here in this community. We've taken a pretty hardline stance on how we're raising our child. And right now, Grandma's been with us for 6 months, which has been great. She makes fantastic soup and likes to decorate with purple. So that's where we're at.
All right, so I'm going to back you up there for a minute, though.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about, you said because of external factors in our community, we're taking a hardline stance on language learning. So what does that mean?
Well, I wish that you had a better photo of me and a better way of actually seeing what I look like, but as you can see, I am Irish American. My mother is from Belfast, Northern Ireland, and my father is the child of Irish immigrants in Chicago, so we are very fair. While I have very dark hair and blue eyes, we are like blonde white people with blue eyes, okay? So my child was born and looks very much like me. You'd never think that he was Latino, so the likelihood that he would not self-identify that way was fairly high. And so why is that important to me? My child has 2 older siblings, his brother Andres, who's 24, and his sister Catherine, who's 31. Andres lives here in Milwaukee, close to us, and Catherine lives in Colombia. And they are his only 2 relatives outside of his father and I, once his grandparents obviously move on. So it's really important for my child to be able to have competency, both culturally and linguistically, to be connected with his family. He is my little boy is the proud uncle of 3 children, 3 little sobrinos. So he calls them his Colombian brothers and sisters. And it's important for us that he have those family connections. Those were issues for me as a child, being a child of immigrants too. I did not have that kind of family situation and had always wanted to have a connection. So intertwined with the fact that my child racially does not appear to be Latino when compared to Mexicans and Puerto Ricans in our community, and the fact that my child's entire family outside of myself and my 2 parents, everybody else is in Colombia. The other thing I think is that my husband and I, our relationship has always been in Spanish. I can't imagine having a conversation with him or my child at this point in English. So our language policies in the house it was really not a discussion. It was, we are a Spanish-speaking family, and that means in every situation, all situations, in and out of the home with our child as well. So we raise him just, I think, like many parents do, knowing that if we speak to him in Spanish, the expectations that he reply back in Spanish. And obviously we have had some issues with that, some problem solving to go through, because we are in mixed language settings fairly often. I mean, we take our child to Target, and he goes to swimming lessons, and he obviously spends time at the Thanksgiving table with my family. But it's really never been a situation between my child and his father and I. We consistently, in all environments, speak only Spanish with him. So that is not something that was easy for me, as I am the more elective bilingual, and I'm speaking the minority language. Obviously, in the home, a language that is not my first language is definitely not my dominant language. And it's my language in which I have several like gaping holes in my proficiency that at least I'm aware of, and knowing that there may come a time in the future when I have to reconsider that, because I'm not going to be able to explain why there's a hole in the ozone layer to my child. You know what I'm saying? So
Dee, I just want to say, that. Like, your situation and mine are identical. They are identical. We're raising minority language at home. We do that only with our kids. My husband and I spoke in Spanish together. My girls do not look Latina. We get strange looks when we're out in public.
Yep.
So I completely resonate, and I cannot wait to talk to you more because it's hard. It's really hard what we do. And I told Heather that as I've started to be home with my girls 100% of the time, that speaking only Spanish has gotten more difficult because I am the only educator that they have right now. And so it's like we have gotten to that point where we were talking about oil wells and and where do they come from and how does that work? And I was like, I don't have any of this vocabulary. And so we're at that really hard point right now where we go, what are the next steps? Because I'm with the girls all the time, and clearly I'm super just dedicated to them only speaking Spanish for exactly the same reasons that you identified. But it's getting super tough for me, right?
Yes. Let me explain two things. So my child's now 5 years old. So he went to 4K in a dual language program, and now he's going to 5K. And I feel like I've gotten a little bit more comfortable with myself and not so black and white about this. I just had to have a conversation with my child about the tar that goes onto the street when they try to patch it up and why it smells so bad.
We were just talking about that this morning.
Well, like, I don't even know how to say that in English. So I basically said to him, you know what, bilingual people, because they have like funds of knowledge in different things, sometimes we have to consult this thing called the internet. Usually I just say, like, go ask Papi how you say this and then come back to me. Or I'll say, like, I model for him what U.S. bilinguals should do, which is, ¿cómo se dice oil spill en español? And I find that my child does that with me too. He can be talking to my mother, for example. This weekend we went to go see Pete's Dragon, and he said, Mami, pero ¿cómo se dice 37 en inglés? And okay, so now I'm not such a bee about this and actually say 37. Like, he knows I'm an English speaker. There's no way around it. It's just that our emotional connection is only in Spanish. So like, we do not have conversations in Spanish, but yes, I will be a resource to him because I'm trying to get him to be metalinguistic and metacognitive about language and accessing resources so that he believes that it's a worthwhile endeavor. I wanted to add for any listeners that are out there too that this is not as easy for my husband as it is for me.
Yeah, we're having the same thing.
So my husband has experienced racism. Mm-hmm. He's experienced like linguistic classism. And there are issues like when we go to the park, especially in certain suburban communities that will remain unnamed, people do look. And I kind of feel like, what are you looking at? Also, like, let me help you understand.
For the record, Dee, he is very güero, like he's very white.
He looks just like me, and people are often thinking, like, are you speaking Italian to him? I'm like, oh no, girl, this is straight up Spanish. Like,
yeah, people always ask if we're Portuguese, and I'm like, no, not every single bilingual person looks like, a dark-skinned Mexican.
Well, really, the question that they're asking is what's this? You're jamming my status quo in my head about what I thought Mexicans were, and so there's that. It's the "Are you Mexican?" question, or "Are you this? Are you that?" So for me, I feel like I'm an elected bilingual. I go for the jugular and be like, this is how we do it in our family, and this is why we do it, and it's fine. I think about my husband and think about how I'm raising my child. My child is not going to have that type of thick skin that I have because he inherently is not a native English speaker. He's going to experience kids calling his classroom the Mexican class or the Spanish kids or whatever. And I realize that he's going to have experiences which are similar to my husband's. My child, when he speaks English the way children learning English as a second language speak English. And I notice that he's got, some of the similar patterns, and I know that he's going to experience a lot of, I think, racial and linguistic ambiguity. Like, people are going to want to know, like, what are you? And because of the way he looks, he's going to have to respond to that his whole life. And I'm hoping that I'm raising an individual that I think pushes those paradigms for people. Other parents who I know that raise their children this way hope the exact same thing for their kids, that they begin to really crash open the idea that certain people in certain ways are just one way. So that's kind of where we're at.
Love it. Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
Awesome. So we can talk a little bit, I think, about our nerdicle for the week. Heather, do you want to summarize it a little bit, and then maybe Dee can talk a little bit about how it plays out, a little bit more, I guess, about how it plays out in her house. And
I feel like, yeah. There's just so much in this conversation. It's so deep. And Dee, one of the things that I really appreciate that you're bringing up is the issue of race. And I feel like we can't go without mentioning you're in the Milwaukee area, and in Milwaukee, Wisconsin right now there's rioting going on, and it's been a really rough few days, and putting ourselves in other people's shoes is always challenging. So one of your goals in talking about your son's thick skin, it has to do with race, and we cannot ignore that when we talk about bilingualism. And it's I think about Kathy Escamilla and Manuel Escamilla's work, and how Manuel Escamilla, who, Dee, you're very familiar with, you spent a lot of time with both of them. He made the comment about how being Mexican has become such a derogatory statement this day and age, and just how frustrating that is. And it's so important for us that we addressed people's comments head on, just like you've said, and and we explain to people that, well, Mexican's actually a country where people are from, and and where we're from, right? And just addressing those stigmas and that ignorance is really important. So Dee, I appreciate that you've brought that up and you're talking about it, and there's nothing more we can do but talk about it, right?
Well, and I will say, in the educational program in which my child participates, he has classmates who are Mexican, he's got classmates who are Puerto Rican, he's got classmates who are white, and he has classmates who are African American. And it comes for him in his little 4-year-old brain last year. He would ask me questions about what it meant to be black and what that was. And we went through a series of questions about, well, what's better, to have pink skin like you and mommy, or to have brown or black skin? And he, at the age of 4 years old, told me it was way better to be pink. And I said, well, what about abuelita? Abuelita and your brother Andres, they're not pink, they're brown. And it really, I could see the silence in his eyes was a lot of processing about racial stereotypes in particular, but also the presumption in his mind that people speak Spanish look one way, and that people that are within the potential of potential friends who are like me look one way. He goes to the park regularly, and he will size up the park in a second. And he'll be like, Mommy, that family there, they speak Spanish. That family doesn't speak Spanish. He does it every time because he's surveying the situation, what's his play entry strategy. And it's interesting how being a part of a dual language immersion program is really pushing paradigms for him, which are forcing him to ask questions that I think other 4-year-olds might not ever have to ask because they're in a monocultural, monolinguistic, and monoracial scenario for schooling. So I just have to say props out for School District of Waukesha Dual Language Program because it's really an amazing opportunity for him.
Well, and I think that's the great thing about dual language programming, the movement throughout our nation, right? Is that we're integrating our schools and our programs. It's far from perfect. But it is a good beginning, and it is a place where we can start dialogue, which is really important.
Well, and I think in some places, I don't know that this is the case in all of southeastern Wisconsin, they are de facto there are desegregation programs for sure. There is no other school opportunity for my child that would get the kinds of students in contact with each other that this program gets. So in lieu of what's happening in Milwaukee and the wild segregation that's going on in this city, where I live, 20 blocks away, this is happening in my city, I just have to say that I feel like there are some communities that are really intentional about building opportunities in which kids from an early age begin to build empathy and see value in each other's funds of knowledge.
Yeah, and so to our nerdicle, this article was written by Stephen Krashen in 1998. All right, so this was quite a while ago, but it is one of the most most used articles and theories. Krashen's work has been around for a long time, and one thing that he doesn't talk about in this article is empathy, and he is addressing that. One of the reasons that heritage language speakers go through the shy period is because of their lack of self-confidence, and he doesn't say they don't have a thick enough skin or whatever, but he's getting around all of these issues that you've addressed, Dee. And the more empathetic and the less ignorant our society is, the more we can move through these issues and have a more open space for people to share their language and not be ridiculed for their language errors or whatever.
Can I just share that if your listeners
Please.
Want to access that article on page 44, I think the most important and critical statement is made at the very end of that page. And it is the reason why heritage language learners end up abandoning Spanish over the long term, or any language that is their home language. And that is that the emphasis is usually in the classroom on learning language, not on acquiring language, and the approach to language teaching is different depending upon the goal. If you want kids to acquire language like or if you'd like them to actually be able to use the language in pragmatic settings. For me, I'm going to go back to like program model, because dual language programs are totally focused on language acquisition, and then only through the acquisition lens is language learned. There is a high level of student agency and ability, fluency, accuracy, and everything comes with that. In our world language classrooms, and I can actually speak of my personal professional experience, the emphasis on accuracy devoid of meaning has allowed some students to receive tremendous praise for a language they'll never learn, and other students absolute which they're already proficient in. It's kind of like akin to asking an English speaker to perform by asking them to write in the past subjunctive, tell me how you wished your weekend would have been. Like, come on now. So there's a difference between like asking a child to perform linguistically from a linguist point of view and then asking him to actually be communicative and productive. So for me, everyone highlight that. Especially if you're in a world language department and you're leading world language teachers who are servicing English language learning or heritage language speakers through a world language lens.
It's a shift. It's definitely a shift, a paradigm shift in our thinking and our social structures that we have established. But just last week, Christa and I were talking about just how important purpose is to our language learning. And if there isn't a purpose, then the learning, we won't engage in the learning, that's for sure.
Well, there's not only that, but we have to remember that language is a social endeavor, and it's meant to bring people together to pass information and stuff like that. So one of the ways that we've dealt with this in our school district is that we have accelerated our native Spanish speaking or our dual language learners to the highest levels of Spanish because we know that an AP test doesn't ask a kid to tell us in the past subjunctive what they wish they would have done on the weekend. They're asking them to interpret language and use language. So when these kids go into higher levels of classes, their spoken proficiency is really, really high, and they're often in classrooms with students who have learned language but not acquired language. So what I want to say about that is that their classmates often have like more accurate writing, but our students have more, I think, practical use of the language. So therein lies the concept of creating bilingual pairs and getting students to resource one another to accomplish tasks that they have in common. And that's been, like, that's just a mainstay of dual language practice, but something that has been kind of like revolutionary to these mixed classrooms. So that's just one way that we've tried to deal with that. And we have done a good job so far. Last year, 100% of our native Spanish speaking or heritage language students got a 4 or a 5 on this AP Spanish language and culture test.
Nice.
As freshmen in high school.
What?
That's awesome.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's
We're
really
really pleased. We're very happy with that.
Yeah, because I spent a lot of, my 15 years in the classroom teaching native speakers at the high school level, but the first 5 years was really advocating to the district and the administration about why they needed to have a different type of instruction. And it's, when I left, it still was at the point where juniors were taking the test, but there weren't programs to support freshmen taking it. Clearly, we only have 3 dual language schools that are public in the entire city of Denver, and one of them will be new this year. So we don't have a lot of support here in Colorado for dual language schools, and I'm super jealous of you ladies who have a lot more maybe opportunity or great programs for that. So I kind of want to go back to our focus of the episode, which is how do you advocate for your child when they are not able to be in a dual language or a culturally diverse setting. I'll just give a quick example, but out of just being really tired this year from having a tiny baby and a toddler, I put my daughter in school for 4 months in a monolingual situation of English because it was the only opportunity. It was the only thing that we could do without driving an hour each way to a really expensive private school. And so I put her in this school at mid-year. She was a little bit younger than the other kids. She didn't really speak any English. And it was really hard for me because even being a bilingual educator and a bilingual parent and advocating for her and filling out the forms, what type of a learner she is, and talking about her Spanish and how this was really important at home, she was bullied by the other kids because she didn't have the language in English to advocate for herself. And the teacher had a lot of different things that she was focusing on, but she wasn't able to focus on the fact that my daughter was feeling frustrated with the lack of language. And what ended up happening at the end of exactly 14 weeks is that my daughter now speaks beautiful English. She speaks Spanish too, but she still has that scar of not wanting to speak it with her peers because she doesn't feel like she's been accepted. So what more as a parent could a person do in that situation?
Well, I can share with you what I have done because my child also went to an only English daycare from the time he was like 2.5 until the time he was ready for a 4-year-old kindergarten. And he went to a parochial daycare, which was great. They were very loving and kind. But one of my child's teachers confronted me in a way that I had never expected, like this would never happen in a public school. But she basically said, I put something by James Cummins that in one of my email signatures saying that when school has the unintended consequence of taking a sunflower and turning him into a rose, we have not added to what a child could do, rather we've subtracted. So something like that. And she's like, well, what do you mean you don't want your child to learn English? And I looked at her and I was like, don't you ever talk to me about my language policy choices. That's between me and my child. It has nothing to do with you. So what you need to do is you need to ask him, well, how do you say that in Spanish? And let him produce that to you. You need to say, well, can you point to what I'm talking to? And like your daughter, within a matter of weeks, my kid was like Vicks all over the place. He could talk and say things, and he could circumvent language. It was amazing. What I began to notice, though, is that he didn't think anyone his age spoke the secret language of the house. So, like your child, like he didn't know that there were like, that this wasn't like mommy and daddy's secret language, but like other kids do this. And he has other little friends in the community, so we would arrange play dates. So there are other families like us that are either only Spanish speaking at home and the parents are fluent English speakers, or one of them's like from Puerto Rico or one's from Colombia. And we would get the kids together as much as possible. My kid is such a strong language model that any kid who's like teetering on the border of like choosing English, he can get them to the other side. Like he can get them to stay in Spanish. So we would do that. Because my husband's also a teacher in Milwaukee Public Schools, he's connected to a lot of families here where we live. And so we were able to arrange play dates and other peer exchanges with kids who are a little bit older than him too, who also are models. We specifically choose to bring our child to certain places to play because we know he will have contact with speakers at those places. So, we've done those things particularly. The other thing is that we started off very, very young with my child, reading every night with him, and we read a lot of Heather's books and other people's books too. But he makes a lot of connections between characters. He watches like movies. We put everything into like the dubbed Spanish, and so he's able to see that there's like other things that happen. He also has a pretty tight relationship with his sobrinitos in Colombia, so he does Skype with them. He does Skype with grandma and his aunt when they're in Colombia. So he knows other people use it. It's just that being in a situation in which all of his little peers didn't, I could definitely see the impact on his language and his feeling about it.
Sure.
So for all of you that don't have access to a dual language program, you're going to have to seek out those types of opportunities and find other parents that... Hi, Thomas. Cutest baby ever. So you just need to find out other parents. And there are other parents. Like, believe it or not, there are so many mixed language households where, like, the mom is from South America and the dad's not, or, like, one parent speaks it and the other doesn't. And those people are also dying for the same connections. Every year, our neighbor down the street, who's a Colombian woman, she always wants to get a little summer school going at her house. And she's a former kindergarten teacher, so she's more than qualified to do this. And so we have other families, and they all like connect over the summer, and they have like experiences together where they read, they sing. Hola, papi. Sí, espere un momento, okay, honey? Toma agua, okay? All right.
I think we're all expiring, huh?
He wants to go to the park, and he wants me to see him climb the monkey bars, and he can go all the way across now, so he's really excited.
That's really exciting.
So I would say just if you really, really want it, you got to really, like, open every bag till you get it. I think a lot of times with parents is, like, they kind of want it, but they're not sure what their real priority is and how to deal with that, because it's a huge commitment. I think Krashen's article talks about that commitment. It's like... actually, no, it was another article I read this afternoon. It's like making sure that your kid wears a seatbelt every time. If you really want your kid's bilingualism, you have to ensure that your child has multiple opportunities to do the heavy lifting. Otherwise, it won't happen. Weekends are pretty sacred. There are times when there are like no English times. When our child was going to daycare, that we were absolutely sure he wasn't watching any TV in English. There was no music in English, nothing. So that was pretty critical. I have to say, when I get to know older children, what I'm finding with a lot of parents has been really critical for them is to continue the parent-child dialogue. I just admitted a little boy today to dual language. He's going into 7th grade. He's only ever been in monolingual instruction. And this kid, he struggles to decode in reading, but when he reads in his head, he has great comprehension, and the kid can write. And so I thought to myself, like, How did this happen? This kid's been in a monolingual setting. How did this happen? The mom said, I sit with him every night and we work on it. He is just so tenacious and so wants this that he is willing, he's really identified it as something that he wants to do. And I think he has felt, because in the past we've said, no, you won't qualify, or we only let kids in 1st grade, blah, blah, blah. he kind of felt like the no meant I'm going to challenge the resistance here and go for it. And so he has, which is really wonderful. I think the key, though, has been with this particular kid, like the relationship between mom, the Spanish speaker, and the kid is tight. They talk every day. They talk a lot. They read a lot together. They write a lot together. And he's like 13. Who wants to hang out with your mom when you're 13? But that bond has been like the critical piece that will help him to, I think, reimagine what his Latino identity is as he starts to develop greater biliteracy. I'm super excited for him.
That's awesome.
It is very exciting. So, Dee, we want to have you back on to talk more about school and like how to advocate for your children in school, and a little bit more about we've talked how much we love dual language programming, but I do think it'd be good for us to address bilingual programming and what the bilingual maintenance and transitional programs, all those different blah, blah, blahs that we deal with all the time. But I think it'd be really good for our parents to know the different programs and, so that they have some language to advocate for.
We can do two things. We can do what kind of programs would you be interested in? Then we can also do the kind of thing like how do you engage your school district as a parent to get these programs into your district.
There we go. We just came up with 2 more episodes.
I feel like that's a whole series. Like when we talked about the different models of bilingualism, now we can go into a whole series of schools. A wealth of knowledge here on this chat. So, well, thank you. I want to respect everyone's time. I know we started a little bit late tonight, but thank you so much for tuning in. We will be back next week with, I cannot remember. Do you remember, Heather?
No, because, I'm not thinking there. I'm thinking we also will share again Dee's article that she wrote for our friends at teachingforbiliteracy.com. Dee wrote a couple articles about raising bilingual children, and it's a little bit more of a background of her story. As well as, do we have a day picked out this week that Dee will be chatting on BilingualWe?
Yes, thank you so much for remembering to mention that, Heather. I knew there was something I was forgetting. Yes. So if people in the BilingualWe Facebook group, which you can find just by clicking on the BilingualWe button on puravidamoms.com, but you can click and you can join our conversation, and any question you have for Dee about bilingualism or raising bilingual kids, you can just post it there. I'll start a pinned thread at the top, and maybe by Friday we can collect all those questions, and Dee can look through them and answer a few of them, if that works for you, Dee.
Sure, it works fine.
Great. So we'll look forward to, I'll post that here tonight, and we'll just look forward to everyone's questions, because when an expert on bilingual education agrees to answer questions, it's a great opportunity to get all of the things, all of your questions asked and answered. So
I think one of the things too, if anybody has questions about how to deal with like miscues in your kids, like how to engage in positive error correction that actually elicits response, let me know. I'd be super happy to talk about that, because I have certainly gone through everything in the kitchen sink with my kid when he says like yo sabo, and things that I now know are totally developmentally normal for kids to do. So let me know if you have questions about how to like effectively do that.
Dee, did you write a blog post about that?
I might have.
I think you did.
I know I shared it in my district, but that's a great one. I think it might be on Teaching for Biliteracy.
I think it is, yeah. I'm going to dig. I'm going to find that one.
Cool.
Awesome. Thank you again, and so much here. The BilingualWe community, I was looking at the blog post, Dee, and I'd actually commented back in March of earlier this year saying, oh my gosh, I need to figure out a plan for my son because I didn't have one. And so I'm very grateful to have my friend Christa here, so I can commiserate with her and we can have a community that's supporting us. And Dee, we're really grateful that you're a part of our community, so thank you so much.
Yeah, I know lots of other parents too, so never feel like you're doing this weird thing on your own. There are tons and tons of parents. Even in my little community where I work, you'd never think it, but there are all sorts of people that are raising their kids in 2 languages and doing it despite like this crazy political climate that we're in and all the xenophobia.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, hopefully they'll be able to engage a little bit in our BilingualWe community too if they don't have another group that they're using for support. Well, thank you so much, Dee, for your time, and we will see you all next week. Have a great week, and we'll see you on the Facebook group here in a few minutes.
Bye.
Bye.